Hi, I'm George Varga, music critic for the San Diego Union-Tribune, and we are here to talk about the 30th anniversary of the Casbah, the legendary San Diego music club. We are here with, from my left, Danny Bell, a recording artist whose second album is about to come out, and who will be playing here as part of the 30th anniversary. Tim Mays, the co-founder and driving force behind the Casbah. The man who for 30 years has made the Casbah a reality with other people. And with Andrew McKeag, who has performed here, we think, between 50 and 100 times with different bands over the years. Tim, you co-founded the Casbah, and you began promoting, correct me if I'm wrong, in downtown San Diego at the Skeleton Club, or was there anything before that?
I did a show in Los Angeles prior to that at a place called Basie's Hall with the Weirdos, the Plugs, the Penetrators from here, and Suburban Lawns. That was in February 1980.
At that point, was it purely for fun, or were you envisioning, hey, maybe I can...
It was fun. It was a hobby. Just started doing it down here. It was fun, and then started booking bands that weren't coming here because they were bands I wanted to see. And, you know, there was obviously monetary aspects to it, but I would make money on some shows and lose money on others, and there was no idea that it was ever going to be a livelihood.
Before the Casbah even began, was there a turning point where you went full-time into booking and promoting? Or?
No, I always had another job. I mean, even when the first bar I had was the Pink Panther with Bob and Peter, and that was pre-Casbah, starting in '86. I had a job the first year there. I worked at the Broadway downtown.
Clothing department.
Clothing, and yeah, pretty much clothing. And I took that job specifically because we didn't know if we were going to make any money opening this bar. And after a year, I was able to take a leave of absence, and that was the last.
And by the
real
bar,
job.
you mean the Pink Panther?
The Pink Panther,
right.
yeah.
Not far from here, right?
A couple miles up on Marina Boulevard. No longer there, obviously, but after a year, I was able to quit my job and make a living between either Pink Panther or Casbah or both.
How did the Pink Panther beget the Casbah?
Well, Peter and I both had backgrounds in music clubs. He had a place called King's Road.
Peter Verbrugge?
Peter Verbrugge, yeah. He had a place called King's Road on 30th, which was International Blend. You know that.
I remember that.
So he did King's Road there for a couple of years. Bob had always been kind of a party-throwing kind of guy. He had vintage clothing stores, and we all knew a lot of people. So the Pink Panther was kind of just like a meeting place for all of our friends and musicians around town. It was the only place owned by young people back then that played good music. We wanted to find somewhere else. The Casbah business came up for sale.
Although, why don't we tell people, you weren't here to begin with, you were down...
No, the original location, which is now Kava Lounge, was called the Harp and Shamrock. And the guy who brokered the deal for the Pink Panther got a hold of us and said, hey, this place is for sale. And we okay, we can open another bar because the Pink Panther was so successful.
Right. Although I'd like to point out that while the Casbah is now legendary, you envisioned it as more kind of a cafe and unplugged music venue.
We had an espresso machine, if you can believe it, and windows that open in the daylight. And we booked bands like Rami K and the Swingin' Gates, or the Forbidden Pigs, CLA, Rugburns. Kind of more local. There was no idea of doing anything crazy big or even touring bands. And then Harlan Schiffman, who is one of the partners, had been doing shows at Iguanas and also the Spirit Club.
In Tijuana, for people who don't remember.
Iguanas in Tijuana, and the Spirit Club. And, bands didn't like playing at the Spirit Club much, so Harlan started booking those bands into the Casbah. He booked Nirvana there, he booked Smashing Pumpkins there. I started getting
You mean
called.
The original Casbah?
Yeah, yes.
Now, Harlan, did you go to any of those? Oh, sorry, Harlan. I apologize. Andrew, he mentioned Harlan. I apologize.
I went to a lot of Harlan shows too. I was 20 when Nirvana played, and I remember wanting to go but not able to go. And then shortly thereafter, I turned 21, and it seemed like that was the only place I went was the Casbah. But I had been going to the Pink Panther with a fake ID for a little while. Until Louis took it away from me one night. Yeah, I was under 21 when Nirvana played there, but I remember distinctly wanting to go to that show because I had listened to maybe their first single or record. I guess maybe Bleach was out by then, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
And then I turned 21 that fall. So at that point, it was like a clubhouse. And I went to every single show that I possibly could see there.
When did you first perform at the old Casbah? Or
The first
one
time I
where
played at the old Casbah was with this band Liquid Sunshine, which was a band that Walter Bitts and Tim Blankenship from the Pull Toys had started.
Was that kind of a psychedelic band?
It
Or
was
do I
like,
remember?
well, it was Siobhan, who sang with Chinchilla later, who's also playing in January for the 30th. She was a vocalist, so it was rock and roll. I mean, it was pretty.
Bad.
Yeah, it was cool. I think it had legs, but like most things, bands are hard, so it didn't work out. But yeah, we opened for the Smashing Pumpkins
That's right.
at that show, which
Wow.
was funny because I distinctly remember that night learning that the headliner doesn't always want to hang out with the support act. Because at the time I was really into that first Smashing Pumpkins record that was on Caroline or something, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be great. We're gonna play with this band, and we're gonna meet them. We're gonna have beers. We're gonna talk about rock and roll. It's gonna be great. And we played our set, and it was packed. And I was, this is great. Where's the? They're not there. Like, they're nowhere to be found. And then suddenly they just materialize on stage, play their set, and then they vaporize again. So that was a learning experience, and I think I did a lot of learning at the Casbah. Just that kind of, this is how rock and roll works.
Right. Now, Danny, you're from the latest generation of performers here. You, I believe, were not 21 when you heard about the Casbah. And did you hang on the sidewalk with your ear against the wall, or tell us about how you found out about the Casbah?
Well, I knew my sister's a year older than me, so she was always able to come in, or she was able to come in before I was, and so she was always trying to get me to come to shows, and I was like, I'm too young, I can't do it. And eventually I joined a band called Boy Chick, and we played shows all around town where I was still underage, but I was able to get into bars and stuff and play, and then we finally got to play the Casbah, and that was definitely like a big deal for us. Like,
How old were you?
I was probably 20 by then.
And did that mean you could perform, but then you had to go out
Yeah.
on the
So
sidewalk?
I was able to come and set up stuff, and then had to wait outside till we played, and then come back and play.
For both of you, I'm wondering, did playing at the Casbah give you a feeling of like, okay, we've made it. We've hit a level that we weren't on before?
For me, definitely. I was like, whoa, a lot of great bands have played here. I felt honored to be able to play same stage or same venue kind of situation.
How about you, Andrew?
Well, given that it was so early in the club's existence that I started, to me it was more like I'd met my favorite new older brothers that I didn't have or something. I mean, Tim and Bob and Peter became mentors in a way. I mean, they knew cool clothing, they knew cool music, they knew cool cars, they threw cool parties. I mean, it just seemed like a natural fit, and it was a place to hang with, your people. And
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Back in those days, in the early 90s, there wasn't the stature, so it was just a place to play. It was the best place to play back then because the only alternative was the Spirit or Bodie's. So it was like, and it was all a bunch of friends playing for friends.
Well, we played all those other places around town that were available, but nothing felt as comfortable and as much like home as the Casbah did at all.
Well, one aspect that might be unique, but you tell me, is that if a band that played here, who lived here, if they weren't playing here, more likely than not, they were here to hear another band, local band, and there was a network of bands supporting other bands that
Yeah.
I haven't found necessarily to the degree that
I've thought about that a lot because in each of the places I've lived, there's been a community of musicians that make stuff happen. But there's something about that time when you're that age, as well as there was something small about the San Diego music, extra small about this community. All the bands were really different. At least the ones from our era. We were all rockabilly bands, or we were all punk rock bands, or we were all metal or funk bands or something. Everybody was
There was one of each of
completely
those.
different. Yeah. And it was the same crowd at every show. So if the Monks of Doom played, we were all watching the Monks of Doom. And if Goober and the Peas from Detroit played, we were watching Goober and the Peas. And if the Cows were here, that's who we went to see. And it was all the same people from all these desperately sort of these insanely different bands stylistically.
Tim, had anyone told you 30 years ago or even 20 years ago that the Casbah would be here 30 years later and thriving? How would you have reacted?
I would have said, well, that's news to me, I mean, no idea back then. I mean, we just kept doing what we were doing, and it's small, got bigger and bigger. And, even 10 years ago, I would, when we did our 20-year anniversary, I had no idea we'd still be doing it here now. And, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Was there any kind of, philosophy or idea that, and it could have been as simple as, we're going to have cool music that I like, or what were the principles that the three of you who co-founded the Casbah?
Well, I think the principle all three of us had was to entertain people. And I read a book by this restaurateur guy named Danny, I can't remember his last name, but his whole philosophy about entertaining or restaurants was, and we've applied to music as well, is make people want to come back again before they've even left, and that's always been our thing, to provide entertainment. When going back to the Pink Panther, every night was like a big house party there. Good music, cool looking place, good people, no attitudes from people. We didn't tolerate people being, like hitting on women unwanted and stuff like that, going way back when, way before the Me Too thing. We're always down with treating people fairly and honestly, whether they're gay, women, men, whatever. And musical wise, our philosophy here has been treat the bands and the fans the way you'd want to be treated if you were traveling on the road and you walked into a club after driving 3 or 4 hours. It's treat people with respect and humility,
The list of bands that have performed here over the years is fairly unbelievable, and you can name them better than I. And we referenced a few: Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins. The plane flying overhead reminds you of Liz Phair playing here. And when the plane flew overhead, she broke into Back in the USSR by the Beatles because of the plane.
You have a good memory.
And Freakwater. But why don't you name a few other bands you know
Right
better
around
than I
that
do?
same time, Morphine played here early on. Link Ray, seeing Spoon here early on in front of about 40 people.
Didn't the Killers play here too?
Killers opened for some band from Sweden. I can't remember their name, but they were third on the bill. Weezer a number of times back when they were starting out. The Jesus Lizard a couple times over the years. That's always been amazing.
Some GBV too.
Yeah, Guided by Voices. Actually, Guided by Voices has never played here.
They didn't play here?
They never have.
What about your favorite band?
X? Yeah, I mean, first time I was able to get them to play here was a big deal for me because, they were much bigger at the time. And they've played here now probably a dozen times over the last 10 years. And, we did a 4-night stand with them a couple years ago, which was, amazing. And, there's so many. I mean, The Cult, when they played here under a different name, which was, they had kind of been off the radar for a while at that point. They were just starting to play again, and I remember everybody being here like, oh my God, I forgot how many great songs they have, It was just hit after hit after hit, And then, Ian is like, 5'2". He's a short little guy, And of course he's best friends with O.
Right.
Go figure.
Well, everybody's best friends.
Yes, exactly.
Danny and Andrew, I'm wondering for you, as fans have come, if you were to name a particular favorite gig or two that you remember, what would it be?
I remember seeing Urge Overkill at the old location, and I remember because I was a fan, and when I got to the club and saw that they had set up all their gear on the stage, but they put their microphones on the floor because they didn't deem it large enough for them to be able to do their job, and I remember thinking, you know what? that's lame. We put bands on there that are bigger than this all the time.
They wouldn't move their gear. They made the opening band was their friends on tour with them.
Wasn't it
And
Warnker and
I don't know, but they made them play on the floor.
Yeah, super cool.
And they rolled in a giant wardrobe case with all their costumes and outfits, like a whole separate case, like a big double wardrobe thing that opened like a closet that they had to put in the dressing room downstairs, which barely fit through the doors. It was just ridiculous. Yeah, that's funny you bring that up. I remember that very well.
But around the same time, we played your birthday party, and we had put together a whole set list, Uncle Joe's, I think, of songs that Tim loved. And one of them was Highway Star by Deep Purple.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get through the tune without the power blowing. And I think it blew 2 or 3 times. There was some sort of an issue with the
There was a power box
transformer
outside,
or something that was blowing. But we would get to the peak part of the solo, and it would go down and everyone would cheer and we'd start it over again.
And did anybody take your car?
My car got dented up really bad there one night, but that was a whole nother time. So,
But isn't Highway Star nobody going to take my car?
right.
Oh, yeah.
Right, right over my head, George. Nobody took my car that night.
Good.
They probably should have.
Danny, how about for you? What is a memorable gig or two that you've attended?
Man, I've been to a lot of really good shows here, but recently I got to see Timber Timbre for the first time. They're one of my favorite bands, so that was pretty awesome. And being like so close, you could see everything happening on stage.
You have, I'm wondering, I'm bad at math, how many, roughly per year, how many nights a year of music do you have at the Casbah?
We're open, we might close 10 nights a year. So we're 350 nights a year, probably. We'll close on big holidays like Christmas. We'll be closed Thanksgiving, New Year's Day, and then every so often we'll close on an off night if there's nothing or somebody canceled last minute.
Right.
So maybe we close 10, 15 times a year at most.
Well, we've talked about the camaraderie that people feel here, and I'm wondering, not for you, Tim, but for Danny and Andrew, does it kind of feel, without wanting to be corny, like a home, if you will?
It does for me. This place has always felt like that, and I talk to a lot of bands now that grouse about not being able to get shows, and I kind of can't even relate, because partly it's because Tim and I have been friends for so long, but I think there's a certain amount of trust that you build up, and I think one of the things that I learned at the Casbah was music and the music business is kind of like an ATM machine. Like, if there's no money in the bank account, you can't take any money out of the bank account. So coming down here, hanging out, I don't do it as much anymore. I'm almost 50, and life just different. But in the old days, that's what built our friendship too, and the trust between the two of us. That whatever I did, he figured would work, and whatever he chose or asked me about, I trusted him. And even now in Dirty Sweet, Mark, the other guitar player, said the other night, he's like, whatever Tim asked me to do, I just say yes, because it always turns out good. Doesn't matter what it is, And that's, I think, to me, that's the ultimate in friendship. And we don't really, Tim and I will talk a lot as friends, but we don't talk about the biz as much as far as what I do or don't do musically. He just calls me every once in a while and I get a show, and then for a while I won't play, and then we'll do something else cool.
Right.
Yeah.
With the 30th anniversary coming up in January, I'm wondering, how far ahead did you begin planning that?
I started working on it. The first thing I started working on was Rocket from the Crypt or Hot Snakes. Probably midsummer, July. Took a long time to get one of those nailed down. And then, I started talking to other bands, Andrew. Mario with the Dragons was an interesting case, because my wife and I have dinner with Mario and his wife every so often.
Mario Escovedo.
Mario Escovedo from the Dragons, yeah. We have dinner with them every so often, and he had made a point of saying a year ago or so that he had sold all of his musical equipment, pretty much, and he hadn't played any music, hadn't even picked up a guitar in ages. And his wife, same thing. She used to be a musician as well. So, they were one of the bands that I definitely wanted to have play. So, I kind of kept putting it off, asking him, putting it off. And finally, we were having dinner one night, and I figured I got to ask him in person. I can't call him or text him or email him. So we're sitting across the table just like this. I said, "Hey, we're doing this in January. I want to see if Dragons want to play." I wasn't sure what he would say, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that sounds really cool. Let me talk to the other guys, and we can find a bass player." And he was in. And then I had asked a lot of bands, and I'd say probably 70% of the bands I approached were able to do it. There's a few other bands that couldn't do it for logistical reasons, but most of the ones, like blocking it out was like a big puzzle, because I had all these bands holding certain dates, and then I finally just started having okay, I need to confirm this date, that date, this date. Do you mind doing a Tuesday? Do you mind doing a Sunday? Because there's only so many weekends in the month, So it all came together though really well. I was very happy with one of the last ones. Melvins have played here years and years, and I've always been trying to get them to do 2 nights, and I pitched them on 2 nights for January, and finally after probably a month and a half they came back and said, okay, yeah, we can do the 2 nights, here's what they are, and it fit perfectly where I needed it to be. So.
One really neat component is that you've got a fair number of great San Diego bands who are reuniting, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Run through a few of them, or as many as you'd like.
No Knife, 3 Mile Pilot, The Dragons, Chinchilla, Uncle Joe's Big Old Driver, Transfer, they haven't played in years. I don't know, there's probably a couple other. Well, Pinback has never left, so they're playing. But yeah, those are the main ones.
Was that easy to accomplish, or did you have to persuade a few of them?
No, I mean, like I said, the Dragons was the one that I was most apprehensive about. Transfer, we had kind of joked around about it over the months leading up to it, and No Knife they're pretty much told me a year ago they'd be up for playing. So, and 3 Mile Pilot, Paul, same thing. It's all like Andrew said. We're all friends with all those people, and it's a thing where, hey, do you want to do this? It's not like you got to negotiate or anything. It's like nobody even asks about money or anything. It's just like, let's do it. Here's what we're going to charge. They know we're going to get paid properly. And
I think he's not giving himself enough credit too, though, because one of the things about Tim is that he has a really adept feel for approaching any of these kind of situations. He already knows what the pitfalls or potential issues are, and knows exactly how to kind of let you know that he understands that. Right. And so that level of sort of empathy it's not just a guy that wants to fill his club with people. It's a guy that wants to do something really special, and he knows that there's certain areas that are a little bit thinner ice, and he's careful about all that stuff. It makes it easier to say yes.
Right. You're performing here, although by the time people view
Probably
the video
too many
happened.
times.
Well, you're performing with Dirty Sweet on this coming weekend.
Right.
Then you're reuniting with Uncle Joe's Big Old Driver.
Right.
Pardon my memory, but how long will it have been for Uncle Joe?
Well, this all about, was it like 10 years after? Yeah, it was 10 years after we broke up that we did our first show here again, I think. And that was for the 10-year, wasn't it? Or was it for the... it doesn't. I don't know. It was some January.
I don't remember either.
But for the upcoming reunion, how long will it have been?
We played last year once for a Thorn Street Brewery party because the guy got a wild hair and called me up, and I said, sure, and we got Dave out here to do it because everyone lives here except for Dave Jass, who lives in Minneapolis. So we kind of would just intermittently get together pretty much whenever Tim would call.
We did like the 25-year thing, and I think we did one a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, it's booking in advance. It's only $200 for Dave to fly out from Minneapolis, so it's relatively easy.
Yeah.
Now, Danny, have you heard of any of the bands that are reuniting for the 30th anniversary? Do you know anything about them, or?
I have heard of a few of them more now that I've been going to more shows at the Casbah. But I used to listen to Transfer all the time in high school, and that was another band that I got to see here when they played their last shows like 4 years ago, and that was really cool. So I'm really excited to be playing with them on their reunion.
And you were legal 4 years ago?
Yeah, I was legal 4 years ago.
But Andrew, you have a 15-year-old son, and is he going to be playing with you anywhere, anytime coming up?
Yeah, actually, he's recently gotten super into playing guitar. And his name's Henry. And for a while, he was super obsessed with the Rolling Stones, which is kind of how he got into playing guitar. And now he's gotten good enough that I talked to Tim about it. I think he's going to sit in with us on Christmas Eve for the Exile and Kettner
Oh, really?
night.
Which is the all Rolling Stones.
Yeah, all Stones, all night. Yep. So we'll get Henry up there to play.
Do you know what he'll be playing on?
Yeah, he's going to do Rocks Off and Honky Tonk Women. Those are the ones he picked. Yeah.
Nice.
And then we're going to give the whole thing to him.
Yeah, he will take it over in 6 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Tim, you talked about the values that kind of drive what you do, but there have been radical evolutions over the past 30 years, the past 10 years, obviously going from analog to digital, the way people consume music. Has that impacted you directly or indirectly?
I think I was talking to somebody earlier about the way that people find out about music now. It's almost instantaneous. If something gets out there and it gets a little buzz, it's out there in the world immediately. Whereas, 20 years ago, you kind of had to let it percolate up through channels like records or CDs or what have you. There was no exposure to things on such a grand scale that there is now. So I think that's helped. Social media has, for better or for worse, has enticed people to advertise. The clubs you need to advertise via social media. 6-7 years ago, you used to be able to put your stuff out there for free, and then with the algorithms changing, now you got to spend money on it. And so I think that has shifted people's expenditures and efforts into social online media rather than print, because the print whole thing has shrunk so much. But I think as far as people consuming music, I opened a record store a year ago, and people are buying records like crazy again.
In South Park, you want to tell people a little about it?
Vinyl Junkies in South Park. It's a great store across the street from the Whistle Stop. But people are buying records, and not only old used records, but new releases. I mean, everybody's putting out vinyl, and we sell stuff, new things that come in. So it's a whole kind of 360 in that regard.
Danny, you've got a new album coming out. Tell people the title, and will it be out on how many different formats will you put it out in?
I do have a new record coming out. It's going to be released January 18th at Vinyl Junkies, and we're going to have vinyl and CDs and, of course, digital. The album's called Wide-Eyed. It's our second album.
How about cassette tape?
Oh, we have a cassette of like 2 singles, I think. But I'm not sure if we're going to be doing the full record on cassette either. But
hindsight is 20/20 for a reason. You're looking back and you can reflect. If I were to think about, not a turning point, but when I realized that the Casbah was really known nationally, that it had a really hip cachet, if you will, was when, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of out of nowhere, suddenly somebody decided it was a great idea for Alanis Morissette to film here because of the cool factor that went along with that. Do you recall that?
I do, very well. That was, we came into this building in early 94. So it was shortly there, probably 95, right? And I remember, it was early on because I was still a bartender here. So I remember they commandeered the office, because that's where they filmed the segment it was for MTV. Ah. And they commandeered the office. They filmed a little interview with her in there, and it was a huge packed show, it was a big night. And I was working behind the bar all night, just selling drinks or making drinks. So, I don't know. It was perplexing how they decided to do it here. We weren't going to say no, obviously, but it was very strange that, because she's pretty much a mainstream artist,
right,
and plopped down right here in this little tiny club,
And then correct me if I'm wrong, when a quite famous rapper came here to hang out.
Ice-T. During a trade show party.
We played that.
Andrew's band was
playing
really?
that
Wasn't
night.
Korn playing too?
Korn. It was a pretty brutal night. One of my guys got sliced with a box cutter. There was a bunch. It was a trade show party for the Action Sportswear retail show,
at the convention.
Which they used to have two times a year, and it was shortly after we moved in here in that same month of January, I think. And the promoter who booked the bands, Spoon was on the bill. These guys were, Korn was, and a couple other Orange County. I think Lit might have been on the bill too.
It's such a weird night.
And the guys who promoted it were from Orange County, and they gave away free passes, like 1,000 or 2,000 of them. And so obviously people came, and the crowd that came was not very savory. I mean, people, at one point there was a standoff on the floor of some guy had gone behind the bar and stolen a bottle of booze and got caught, and we called him out. And I remember I didn't have a lot of friends here that night. It was with my staff and you guys, and we were all facing off this guy and his posse on the floor. Like, was there going to be some trouble here or not? And the guy kind of backed down finally. But Ice-T show, we stopped letting people in at a certain point because we didn't want any more knuckleheads in the house. And Ice-T shows up, and my doorman had no idea who he was. And Ice-T rolls up and he says, "I'm sorry, we're not letting anybody up."
Wait, did Body Count play?
No,
Oh,
he didn't
okay,
play.
yeah.
He just came as a attendee.
But did he get in? Or?
Well, he came up, and then my doorman turned him away, and Ice-T pulls out a wad of cash, says, "Is it a money thing?" And the guy goes, "No, it's not a money thing." And I happened to find out, like, Ice-T's at the door, and Ice-T was walking away, and I ran out and grabbed him and said, "Hey, come on in, let me get you a drink." And so he came on in, and of course that kind of only fueled the crowd, because if you know, the Korn fans,
Right.
Ice-T, you know, the kind of
We
fuel,
fit right in.
fuel the thing, you know. So at the end of the night, we had to pull the plug on Korn because they wouldn't stop playing. The place was going crazy. And at one point, people tried to rush the stage door. Somebody pushed it open, and a bunch of people tried to come in, and my doorman Phil got stuck outside, and the door closed, and somebody sliced him right here with a box cutter. And not a serious injury, but you know, it was a pretty gnarly night.
Andrew, what do you remember about that night?
I remember looking at the pointy headstock guitars that Korn was playing, thinking, there is no way those are going to be popular again. There's no way that band's going to be successful. I knew nothing. Yeah. I just remember it being crazy and packed, and that it was always on the edge of being out of control.
Yeah,
and
it
I
was
think
very tense.
we pretty much got out of there, or at least we slunk to the back.
But
after
that was
we
really an
played.
anomaly. I mean, one of the amazing things to me is that you've got a club that has been here for 30 years, and apart from that, I can't think of an incident.
No, I mean, you know, that was a minor incident in the grand scheme of things, and there's been things where we've had tense nights before. I can remember Flogging Molly doing a couple nights here over St. Patty's Day, long time ago, you know, and a bunch of skinheads showing up for the first night and causing problems and having to be thrown out, and you know, worry amongst the staff that they were going to come back the second night with reinforcements, which never happened. But there were nights like that where things would be tense just because of some of the people who would show up for bands and stuff that, you know, were hard to deal with, but not very often.
How long were you a bartender here?
Oh, I was a bartender. I did sound for a little while too. Not very long. It was probably less than a year, if even that.
Andrew, how good a bartender and audio guy was Tim?
Tim's a great bartender.
Bob, my partner, my dear departed partner, Bob, was the sound guy at the old Casbah. He mixed Nirvana.
That's crazy.
We had an 8-channel board with a powered mixer built in. Turned it up till it started feeding back, and that was all you could do.
That was about it, yeah.
What do you have now?
Oh, we've got a digital 32-channel out of Behringer. What's the Soundcraft? I don't know.
I don't know,
Whatever the popular model is for a club this size. Yeah.
Tim, in theory and in reality, you could continue the Casbah as long as you like, but are you looking down the road, and what are you foreseeing?
I haven't, you know, I mean, I'd like to lessen my workload over the next 5 years, but it's hard to teach somebody how to book stuff. It's kind of something you just learn. Andrew booked clubs in Seattle for a while. There's no book, no manual, no. The thing is trying to figure out how much a band is worth and to offer them whatever money you think you can make on the show without losing a ton. And that's hard to teach, and it's still hard. We lose money on shows all the time still.
The one thing you can teach is no reggae.
Yes, that's written in the book. But no, it's just like, you know, so I don't know. I mean, at some point, maybe hire somebody else to help with the booking and stuff.
Andrew, directly or indirectly, when you began booking in Seattle, is there anything you had learned from Tim, either from him telling you, or just through observation that you applied?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I was booking, I started off doing museum events at the Experience Music Project. We had a really decent sized budget, which was also known as bottomless for a little while there. And so we did these amazing curated concerts and everything from 300 seats seated to 1,000 capacity standing. So I kind of got my trial by fire time there.
With other people's money.
With other people's money. But I always tried to do things that made sense.
Yeah,
I wanted a
course.
full room. And so when I got out of there, I went to a club that was just under 300 seated and immediately applied all the aesthetic approaches that I saw in Tim and his guys down here. And then I went from there to the Tractor Tavern, which is not unlike the Casbah in that it's a sort of an institution in Seattle, more sort of no depression, alt country based, at least when it started, like a 400 cap room where you got to make it work. But I worked directly with the owner who had done all the booking up till that time, and I kind of engineered that job. I was just like, man, do you want somebody to come in and help you? And a lot of it, like he said, a lot of it books itself. It just makes sense. You know what works for the room, but then there's a portion of it that's kind of like curating any other event, where you want to make sure things make sense. Is it a fit for the room? Is it a fit for the audience? Will people be willing to stand for a show? Are they going to need seats?
Tim, pardon my memory, have you ever had a seated show? I think maybe
we've
once or
done a
twice.
number of seated shows. Crispin Glover did a spoken word thing here back in...
The film actor, for people who may know.
Yeah. So he set up a little tour where he was going to read from his book and show a film he was working on. A lot of logistics went into the show. We had to pay him X amount of dollars. We had to pay for his airfare to get him here he was on Florida the day before. And we had to get him a hotel room at a 4-star hotel. So it was going to be seated. We had to have a path for the beam of the projector to go through the crowd onto the screen, but in such a way that if anybody got up to go to the bathroom, they wouldn't cross the beam. Very, very difficult to pull off in that small room. Right. So we had everything arranged. He missed his flight. Sam Shamus was volunteered to pick him up at the airport for us. This was pre-cell phone.
Sam, the owner of the library.
Sam, the owner of the library, yes. So we give Sam the flight number, and he goes down there and waits, and he calls us. He's not here. He's not on the plane. So we get a call from somebody like, he missed his plane. He'll be on the next one. It's going to arrive at this time. Okay, Sam, just stand by. So Sam waits there the whole afternoon, and he gets here. The doors are at like 7. It's sold out. It's only like 150 people. Crispin gets here about 5:30. Comes in, immediately says, this isn't going to work. We need to rearrange everything. And we had to unbolt a kind of a permanent table out there to move some things around and build a little platform for the projector. And so he gets up to go do a sound check, and he goes, okay, where's the lavalier mic, like we're wearing now, right? And I hadn't noticed that in the rider, and I'm like, oh, we don't have a lavalier mic. What are you talking about? He goes, I got to have the right things to do my performance. He went full Crispin Glover. He went River's Edge on us, just like, heated smoke coming out of his nostrils and stuff. And so my sound man took a little drum mic and was able to fashion a clip and make a lavalier out of it. And so he did the whole show. And the movie he was working on had a bunch of Mongoloid actors in it, and it was kind of demeaning to them and kind of demeaning to women and stuff. It was very, very harsh film, and it wasn't in working stages, but he showed it, and then afterwards, end of the show, he's coming back to the office, and a female patron came and accosted him in the hallway before he could get in the office. He tried to close the door, and she pushed her way open.
About the film?
Yeah, about the film. Just like, how could he defend that, and what was he thinking? And he tried to come into the office. I was in the office already, having opened the door, and he was there, and she kind of chewed his ass out, and he didn't really have any good explanation. And he got in the office finally, said something that satisfied her, and came in the office and said, "Oh man, I don't even want to go back to my hotel. I need to go back to LA. Can somebody drive me back to LA? And
Sam?
we had booked this hotel for him at the Imperial House up on
Right.
on Fifth Avenue, and he hated it. You know, when he checked in, he said a bug, there's a cockroach in the bathtub or something. So he's like, "This is not a 4-star hotel." So I was like, somebody, big fan. I was asked him, I said, "Would you be interested in driving Crispin Glover back to LA tonight?" And she's like, "Oh, I'd love to." I'm like, "Great," because I don't want to have to pick him up in the morning to take him to the airport. So we got him out of our hair, and it was, to this day, it was one of the. I was telling Andrew, it was one of the most difficult shows we've ever put on here. It was a nightmare.
I'm wondering, off the top of your head, if you think back to the first time you had, and the only time I think that you had Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins, roughly what did you pay them?
Good question. Tickets were probably what, $9 or $10, maybe.
Had to be
We
right
could
there.
sell 100 and 150 tickets there, so maybe $1,000 in each case, maybe less. I don't remember. I wasn't here for Nirvana. I was out of town. I was here for the Smashing Pumpkins one, but yeah, it couldn't have been more than $1,000.
Danny, you've played at other venues. I'm wondering how is the Casbah different, or what makes it stand out?
I like just the layout of the place, and I don't know. It's just there's just something special. You have this back room. People can play in between bands, which is awesome, and the back bar. If
And
the front
I'll
bar
point
is
out
too,
we're in the back room right now.
yeah,
for
we're in
people
the
who don't
back
know
room. If that bar is too crowded in the front room, you come to the back and hang out. And you could still watch a show from the little television screen up there. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of the perfect spot to play in this city. And as far as I've gone, like touring little places here and there, it's one of my favorite places I've ever played in.
I take it you might agree with that, Andrew?
Yeah, oh yeah. It also, and it's interesting to me that the original location and this one share this one common aspect, which is that you can lean on a wall right next to the band while they're
Oh, yeah.
playing and watch.
The little rail.
Yeah, there was a rail on that side on stage left, and then there's a rail on this one on stage right. And that kind of intimacy, it's a bizarre connection, but you wind up with this
I
weird
never thought
connection
about
with the
that.
group that's right there. And I realized last year playing the Exile night that I was on stage left, and I was like, I'm moving myself over because it's way more fun on this side when I could see what everybody's doing.
Like
and-
by the
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I always watch from, right there, you know, on that side of the room.
Because it's like being on stage with a
Yeah.
band, and,
Yeah.
and there's a few other bars in this size and this circuit in the country that are similar, but nothing quite like that.
I'm bad at math and not great at the topic, but are there venues in America that do the kind of music that you've done that have lasted 30 years? The 930 Club kind of morphed into a
It's a
concert
massive
venue.
space.
Yeah, so how unusual is it that you know of?
I don't know. I mean, the Continental Club in Austin's been there a long, long time. They're a little more rootsy, like alt country, but they do some of the same bands we do. And Steve's of a like mind. He's a good friend. He runs his club the same way we do. I don't know how many years they're going there, maybe 30, maybe more. Belly Up, you know, obviously has been here a long time. Around the country, though, I mean, the Roxy in LA has been there a long time, but it's now just kind of like they hired Golden Voice to book it. So
Right.
they don't run it themselves.
Ramona in the bottom of the hill.
Yeah,
San
that's
Francisco.
still there.
Yeah.
That's been there.
But the Roxy was fairly mainstream when it opened in terms of who it booked.
Yeah, it was pretty much, yeah, way more mainstream back in the 70s. It's been there a lot longer, but I don't know of any, I can't think of any, you know.
Crocodile's been there a long time.
Yeah.
Wrapping things up, we're here during the day. I'm rarely here during the day. You have an office. I took the liberty today of peeking in the women's room, which I've never done before for obvious reasons. And I noticed a real difference, which is the men's room seems to have quite a lot of decorative items, if you will, that people have put on, and the women's room appeared immaculate.
Well, here's a little story about the two bathrooms. So before the Casbah came in here, it was a gay bar. Well, it was a lesbian bar when we got it, but before that, it had been a gay men's bar for many, many years, leather bar, actually. And the women's room was actually the men's room back in those days. A lot more room, private stalls, the whole deal, if you get my drift.
Not at all. Maybe you could elaborate.
That's a whole other interview. But, you know, women are a little more respectful of the bathroom, I guess. I don't know. We find a lot of paper towel messes in the women's room and stuff like that. But the men's room, I mean, one of the selling points when we came into this location was when we did the tour, and we went into the little office that we've got and walked in there, and there's a bathroom, a private bathroom. That was a big selling point. And we said, okay, we'll take it, because at the old Casbah, there was no private bathroom. So if any of the staff had to use the facilities, we had to wait in line with everybody else. And on a busy night, there'd be a line in that little hallway of the men's room there, and people would be pounding on the door, you know, like, hurry up.
I remember the door was right next to the cigarette machine.
Right.
And I was standing in line one night, and John Doe was in the line with me, and he decided to buy a pack of cigarettes while we were waiting, and he couldn't get the cigarette machine to work. And I was a kid, and I leaned over and I was like, maybe it's trying to tell you something. I don't know what got into me to say that. And he looked at me and he goes, don't go moralizing on me, kid. I was like, moralizing? Huh.
So the bathroom is kind of a turning point in that for a band, a turning point is when you go from a car to a van and then maybe to a tour bus. For you, it was going to a venue where the office had a bathroom.
Yeah, it was a big deal, you know. Plus an office. The other place didn't even have an office.
Yeah. Well, where did you work out of in the original
I worked
Casbah?
Sitting at the bar there, you know. I mean, it was all phone call based. There was no internet back. It was pretty much pre-internet, and so I would go down.
In the old days, you'd call the phone.
I'd do whatever I
You'd
did
have the
there.
show list.
During the day, I'd do whatever work I needed to do there, running the bar, me and Bob, and then I'd go home to, you know, 20 or 30 messages on my machine and pick them up and listen to them and call people back. So yeah, it was a different world.
So the Casbah will be turning 30 in January, and from what day to what day in January
We're
are you
doing
celebrating?
from the 3rd through the 31st.
Every day.
Every night.
And off the top of your head, run through the lineup, whatever you can remember.
We got Andrew and his Yacht Rock project on the 3rd, kicking the whole thing off.
I like how it's mine now.
Well, you're in the band.
I am.
I don't know those other guys.
What were you referring to?
Oh, I play in this yacht rock band called High Tide Society. So
we're doing that. That's the first night. Then we got the Hot Snakes, Chinchilla, and Uncle Joe's Big Old Driver, TSOL, Man Man. We're doing a big Bowie birthday celebration thing.
With Ariel or who?
Ariel's going to play station to station. Shuffler's going to do something, and then another new band's going to do some Ziggy stuff. Then we're doing 2 nights of the Melvins, then 2 nights of the Dragons, and Matson 2. What do we got coming after that? That's through the middle of the month. Then we got, oh man, I'm drawing a blank.
Did you mention the Penetrators yet? Or?
Oh yeah, coming up on the Penetrators and Silent Comedy and Transfer and No Knife and Pinback's doing 2 nights and 3 Mile Pilot. And we've got a couple nights with bands that kind of just fell into the month, like the Districts and Mustard Plug. Oh, we've got Buck 09. We're doing an emo night thing that's a DJ very popular amongst the emo crowd. That may be it. There's some others in there that I'm forgetting, I'm sure.
And isn't Gary Heffern, the lead vocalist in the Penetrators, doing a separate thing as well?
Yeah, he's doing a separate show with him and a bunch of local musicians that he's putting together. And the Dills are playing, well, Chip is playing, you know, Tony passed away. So he's put together a new band, I think with his daughter maybe. And they're going to do a set of Dills stuff. And the Dinettes are playing during the month. The Schizos, Danny Bell's playing during the month. Gary's thing, he says it's going to be the last show he's ever going to do. I don't know, you know. Now, he's flying over from
Finland where he lives.
He's spending the whole month here.
So is that the farthest that anyone is coming that you know of?
Yeah. Yeah, I started talking to him pretty early on too, actually last summer as well. We booked the flight real early. He's got to go from, he lives in this weird little town. He's got to fly out of a place called Rovaniemi. And they fly from there to London to New York, and then New York to here. So,
and I can't think of a better illustration of how meaningful the Casbah is to people, that somebody who you're not paying thousands of dollars to is coming. Now, granted, he'll be here for a month, but nevertheless, that you have to have a real deep feeling to do that.
Gary and I go way back. I mean, he lived in my garage back in the early '80s. Country Dick lived in the garage for a little while. Then Gary moved into the garage when Dick moved
Country Dick
out.
at the Beat Farmers.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that by design or purely coincidental?
Well, we had a garage and they needed a place to stay that was cheap. I don't think we charged them rent, you know? Yeah.
And Danny, Tim is a father, but in a more figurative sense, has he been a father figure to the music community here in San Diego?
I think without a doubt, he's a father figure, an older brother figure, a friend, a confidant, and just a trusted human who does cool stuff for cool people. And it's one of the reasons that when people complain about not being able to get what they think they deserve out of the Casbah or the world that surrounds it, I think they just haven't put the time in, you know, because it's all there. He's a good dude.
How about for you, Danny?
I totally agree.
Tim, tell people what a contract writer is, and then if you could give a colorful example or two of contract writers that you've dealt with.
So a contract writer is basically a set of conditions that you're supposed to meet, things you're going to provide, sound system, technical-wise, and also hospitality-wise. And, you know, typically most shows here at the Casbah, we kind of stipulate up front when we send a band an offer that they're going to get a meal buyout, they're going to get some drink tickets.
A meal buyout, meaning they're not eating here,
we'll
but...
give them $15 to go eat wherever they want because we don't have a kitchen. They're going to get some drink tickets for alcoholic beverages. They're going to get waters and sodas and juice and coffee. We get writers all the time that have way more than that, and we dutifully cross everything out. We do get bands, if it's a big band that's sold out a show and, you know, there's money in the right, we budget a certain amount for that hospitality. So we'll go the extra mile and get them a few things and set them up in the office. And here we don't get too outlandish of things, but some of the bigger shows we do in other venues, you know, they'll ask for, I can't remember which band it was, but they wanted like $2,500 worth of hospitality stuff for the day, for them and their crew and the opening band. And, you know, there's stuff on there and you go out and you have to send somebody to the market to shop and buy all this stuff. And, you know, it takes them 2 or 3 trips because there's so many things. And at the end of the night, most of it's picked, you know, the crew takes it home because there's so much left. Yeah. So, yeah, we're pretty good about dealing with that, crossing this stuff out. No green M&Ms or any of that kind of stuff.
Danny and Andrew, what do you put on your contract writer?
Oh, I just take what we can get. Most of the time, I don't need anything. The venue usually provides whatever we possibly could really need to perform. So I've never really had to ask for anything.
How about you, Andrew?
Well, certainly when you play the Casbah, you don't. I mean, as a local band, there's no rider. You just trust that they're going to give you some drink tickets. And I usually wind up with a few of those in my shirt pocket by the end of the night the next day. But no, I mean, in other bands I've been in, for sure. And then as a talent buyer, I crossed my share of stuff off of riders. And then I've done my share of shopping, doing production myself. But no, I mean, in the Presidents, we had a full rider and
the Presidents of the United States.
Yeah. And so you kind of come to rely on it. You know, you get out of the van, you go in the venue, the rider's set up, you get your sandwich and something to drink, and then you kind of rely on that as not only home base but also as a restaurant for the afternoon in a strange place.
Well, I recall Iggy Pop's tour manager used to put a new Harley Davidson down.
Well, that was one of the most insane.
Somebody...
That's on the Smoking Gun for those of you that want to go look at it. But that guy is hilarious. Whoever that TM was.
His riders are always really funny. Yeah,
that's a really good one. I think there was a farm animal of some sort, like on the horse maybe, and certainly a motorcycle.
A lot of bands add mood-altering substances on their riders, and that used to be the code word. Now they actually just put weed, which, you know, we've never gotten. There's some things I just won't get no matter who it is, like 6 pairs of black socks, 6 cotton T-shirts, batteries. I never get batteries or cigarettes, stuff like that. It's like, you know what, you get your own batteries. You know, if you want cigarettes, you're gonna have to go buy them.
I mean, ultimately, if the band generates enough money, then they can spend their money however they want to do that. And it all ultimately comes out of your end of it, if you on balance. Right. So you're only spending your own money if you do that.
Okay, I just reminded me of something there. So we did a show at Symphony Hall a couple years ago. Bon Iver. Catering budget, $8,500.
Wow.
They were traveling with a full kitchen. One trailer had a full kitchen, a chef, and a kitchen crew that they wheeled in and set up in the backstage area at the Symphony Hall. Set up this like stoves, refrigerators, the whole 9 yards. And we had to hire 2 local people to basically be runners to go do the shopping for them, and then helped with all the setup and cleanup. And these two ladies that I hired were busy all day, from like 8 in the morning till probably 11 at night, attending to this thing. And so the chef made 3 meals that day for the whole, there was a crew of about 30, 40 people. And they made meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Plus there was, various snacks and other things going on all day. They made blackened cod for dinner, similar to what they do at Nobu, the really expensive restaurant. And I got to tell you, it was one of the best things I've ever had. But, and it's like they were making enough money, and there was that much money in the budget that they chose to allocate it for that, something that made them happy and content.
And there's certain shows where that makes sense. I mean, you want to keep people on site. If you've got a big touring party,
yeah, a lot of moving parts,
and you can't have them have the crew running around town getting food all day long because they need to be there working. So if you specify meal times and it's only 20 feet away, it makes everything work smoother. And then you have the artistic-driven pickiness that comes with success.
Right.
I booked a Little Richard show one time at the museum, and at soundcheck, I asked him how everything was going, and he said it was fine. He said, but his back was really hurting. He'd had a car accident 10 years before or something. And he said, is there any way you could get me a doctor to take a look at my back? And I said, yeah, you'll be at the hotel in a little bit. I'll have somebody sent over. So I got like this surgeon that worked with the Seahawks, who was Paul Allen's guy, to make
Paul Allen, who ran EMP.
Right.
Yeah.
You started EMP and owned the Seahawks. So the doctor went over there, and he was this was a back specialist, right? And so he went over to the thing, and I thought everything was cool. And I get a call from Richard at my office, and I think the phone's Little Richard. And he essentially says, well, what I really need is a doctor that can write a prescription. And so I was like, oh, okay. So hung up the phone, made some more calls, arranged to have that sorted out, sent him over to the hotel. And then I encountered Little Richard coming up the stairs to get on the side of the stage to do the gig. And I said, how you doing now? And he just said, oh, I'm fine. I was like, oh, okay, it worked. Good.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And as the two of you know, you may not know that Robert Lopez Alves used to work at the Continental Hyatt House Hotel in Hollywood.
Richard lived there.
And Little Richard lived there, and Robert was the guy who would bring him breakfast nearly every day with room service.
I never knew that. No, I'll have to ask him about that.
And then as Alves, he was on tour in Europe, and they ended up at the same festival.
We played that. The presidents played that festival with him in Spain. Did he have a conversation with him at that?
Yeah, he said that Richard went, Robert, you never told me that you...
I could just see those guys having a conversation,
Oh,
man.
God.
That would be
It was a
hilarious.
great show.
That would be the film I'd love to have.
Alves was big in Spain.
Yeah.
So last question, I'm going to begin a sentence and then have you all complete it. To me, the Casbah is... Or life
sorry.
without the Casbah would be...
Lame.
Tim, take your
Boring.
take on the question.
To me, the Casbah is my home away from home. Like you said, I could walk around here blindfolded and not bump into anything. And, when I come here to see a show, it's like watching it in my living room.
A great living room. Andrew?
I think to me, the Casbah is family. At this point, it's family.
Thank you for joining us to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Casbah, a landmark in not only in San Diego, but really across the country.